welcome to the I guess what are we scheduled for? We're only 5 minutes off, 1:45. We're going to have a major meeting with track 2 reps here in a couple minutes. That talk's going a few minutes long. We're going to get started. Hold you guys up anymore. So I have Richard Rushing here to talk about some Star Trek stuff. And Richard's day job is somebody has a Motorola device in their pocket. You're somehow way connected to Motorola.
Yeah, I'm kind of like the CISO. So.
Right, fair enough. So without further ado, Richard, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I was asked to give a mobile security talk, and I typically don't give mobile security talks. Not because I don't like mobile security. It's just you get into certain areas of, oh, can we talk about exploitation of Android or iOS, and you get all sorts of things. So this is actually kind of a high-level talk that talks about the issues that you have with mobile security. And this is one of the reasons I deem this the Kobayashi Maru scenario, kind of matching the Star Trek theme. It came to me when, for those that don't know, the Kobayashi Maru scenario, it was in the second movie, and it basically was an unwinnable scenario. There was no way to win the scenario about it. And mobile security is very much the same way. If your scenario is to make mobile security or mobile devices secure, you're not going to be able to win that argument. And I'll go talk through why that actually is and make some suggestions around the area that's functioning in that. A couple of ground rules, and I always kind of start my presentations with ground rules so you understand some of the concepts and everything else. And it goes back to the Kobayashi Maru. Adversaries, bad guys, criminals, for lack of a better term, cheat. They don't follow the rules. They don't do anything that's around that. They will get at data any way possible, even through illegal means that's there. Us being the good guys, we don't. We have to follow laws and different things that allows things to actually happen. And this, you're starting to even see very much in government and everything else where there is getting a very strong divide in encryption arguments, mobile device, privacy. These things are not going to get any better. There's not going to be a massive solution. It's going to be the same thing that's there. When we talk about exploiting, we're typically, especially when we talk about mobile devices, it's predictability and patterns. I love when people say that they've taken what they want to call anonymized data from mobile devices, and they go, we've ran this anonymized data sources. Most of those sources, when universities take that data set, they can calculate it's no longer anonymized. Roughly about anywhere between 68 and 80% of the device information they're able to track back to a single device based upon patterns. We all follow the same kind of patterns. We all follow the same kind of predictability. We go to the same train stations or shopping centers, everything else. We use our devices in and around the same area, and you go home and you still use your devices. So if you're looking at tracking, GPS coordination, everything else, it's very easy to track an individual device with a high degree of accuracy just by where it started its day from, where it went to, and then where it will return to. And those are all parts of predictability and patterns. If you look at the OSI stack, this 7-layer stack that's based on different properties that you go up through, until I refer to it as RF gargles or radio frequency gargles, so I can put some glasses on and actually see where the signals are going from that in the air, I will never be secure. Simply due to the fact that when this comes up and says I'm connected to a cell tower or connected to a Wi-Fi, it may be the access point in the back of the room, it may be the access point that's somewhere behind this wall, I don't know. I have no idea. The same with the cell tower. I think it's the one that's outside, down the street, but it is no guarantee that it's actually there because RF, or radio frequency, is about range and power. So how far does my signal go And then if I want to see that signal, I have to amplify the reception of that through an antenna, or if I want to transmit to that device that's there. Time and time again, we've seen where RFID or other things like your passport says you have to be less than 6 inches away. And the next thing you know, there is somebody's article that talks about how they're able to pull off the RFID in people's passport from 30 feet away by using an antenna, or pick a Bluetooth lock from 1.5 miles away. These are different things that you get into that says, wow, it's all about power and all about the functions of that's there. So mobile devices are really cool. That's one thing I love about them. I can do so many things, and they get cooler every time they go on. There's a huge speed and development process, they do more and more and more data, more abilities, more capabilities, things that are going on. The power of devices has grown. Back when cellular phones were first there, the wonders of gaming was Snake. Really boring, lack of a better term, but hey, that was the only thing you had. It wasn't anything that's on that side of it. Other things that came into it were OS environments changed. Different operations, different capabilities that are actually there. The same with network speed, the storage of devices, and storage capabilities, where I remember megabytes was the capability that was there. We're now into gigabytes and the capabilities that are there. The number of radios in your device went from 1 to somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7, and most modern devices that are actually there. Some good statistics, just data, looking at how devices make. One thing about these devices that a lot of people don't realize is that they have a unique characteristic of they're really powerful. These have the same processing capability as most of your modern gaming consoles, both on a graphics side and a CPU side. So they're really, really powerful devices. But most of the applications that you're running are talking to other things outside of this device. This device is kind of a hub, and it's pulling data down. So if you start looking back, and this goes back to 2000 when we first starting to see the, quote, smartphone arena, was that you had a very large number on a subnetwork of 2G, which gave you about a throughput speed of maybe about 150K, really slow. But you didn't need that much that's there. And the total global traffic was about 1 terabyte per month. Just 1 terabyte per month back in 2001. So relatively small amounts of data that was there. It took almost till the midpoint of 2002 till we reached 1 billion text messages per day on that side of it. I think my daughter sometimes sends that many in just a day, but it's truly amazing where we've actually come from into the next area. And you can see how it pretty much is just skyrocketed, almost a logical thing. So as you get into it, we went to 1 petabyte around 2007. You had social ads that launched from Twitter, Facebook, iPhone introduced, Android introduced, Spotify, 3G, and only 3G back in roughly 2009, which is not that far back. You had a vast majority of the phones still in the GSM. 3G was brand new and only consumed about 10% of the population that was there. As you continue going up, you get into more and more networks. 4G coming out in 2012 was rolled out. So if you look at that, that's less than 4 years ago, and now we have 5G on the cusp of being prototyped out. And we keep continuing to do this over and over again as we progress. And if you start looking at what the capabilities are, you really get to the point where mobile traffic is roughly about 15% of all IP traffic, somewhere before 2020. So you're talking a huge amount of data is all going to be traveling over these devices. And in some cases, insecure, not secure, different ways, and we'll talk a little bit more So let's kind of break down the device. This is the easiest way to look at it. So mobile devices in and of itself are typically the operating system. Now we used to have a ton of different operating systems for mobile devices. We now have two, pretty much. Android and iOS. It's software. It's just like Microsoft, it's just like everybody else's. They have bugs, they're written by people, they have vulnerabilities. Some of them are really big, some of them are patched. For those that didn't see in the news this week, Google announced their part of their Project Zero interfaces with Android was basically a 250,000 bug bounty program. Do these large-scale attacks like stage fright and some of the others, that's the payout for some of this. So they're trying to get things better. Same goes for Apple introducing their bug bounty program. Again, people are trying to make the software better. Patching, you always have two sides of the coin. When patches are released, how quickly the carriers adopt them and allow them to push to their devices. Do they embed other patches? And this is the common issue that you run into with patching and everything else, is do I roll a lot of patches into the system? Do we keep the patch level that's there? Do I patch just a one-time capability and don't leave maintenance release stuff that's there? So there's long-term fragmentations that occur of devices that don't get love and care, for lack of a better term. Other devices that get care on a regular basis. And some do better than others. Some carriers do better than others. Some independent device is say, hey, I don't have a carrier. Some of those do better than others. Sometimes those are forgotten. So it's one of the continual areas to focus in some of the things. Applications are kind of slightly weird. So when I'm talking about applications in this context, we talk about replacement applications. So people are replacing their internal applications because they want additional features. Oh, my camera, I want to have filter sets or anything else. They'll download new cameras and replace their entire camera, which can be really good, but at the same time on the OS level, that becomes really problematic because you now have to associate with this, and it's typically impersonating some of the other camera capabilities. So it's kind of like if you, on a PC, you set something to default. It says, anytime I see this file, always open up this application. And that may be not the case, and sometimes that causes problems inside the devices. One of the biggest issues that things have is dealing with rooting or jailbreaking devices. So I take a device that's designed to have some levels of security, and when I break it through jailbreaking or I root it, I take that security level away. So everything runs with full permissions, everything runs as this, and you see time and time again malware that focuses on jailbroken phones and rooting phones, because in a lot of cases that's around 20% of the market share. And a lot of times it's just done because people think they need that capability. And in most cases, right now, it used to be the biggest argument was for tethering capability inside of carriers, because some carriers would charge you for different things for tethering, and most of those have since went away and went away. So the need for jailbreaking and some of the other ones has kind of dropped off, but you never know where it's there. The phones do have more protection than your PCs do. They operate in a least privilege mode with accounts. They also operate in a sandbox environment. They also operate in a permission level. So when you have an app, you can tell it what actually to do, which if you look at it is much different than the PC. People always ask, it's like, oh, cell phones are so insecure. And I'm like, they're much more secure than any Windows environment or any Mac environment in a lot of cases. Just because of the capabilities that are built around that native operating system. Now, one of the things that these devices communicate over is the cellular networks. So, the cellular networks have been around for a while, but it's been around for a while. It's older protocols. GSM was an older protocol that had been around forever, and they basically figured out how to decrypt it, just like all cryptology after a while gets weak, and this is the same case. As people were like, oh, I can now have a conversation and I can listen to your conversation as it goes across the airwaves if I'm GSM. So people naturally moved off of GSM into some of the others from the 2G to the 3G environment. But, as in the carriers, if I'm out of range, too far away, my 2G networks travel farther than my 3Gs. Again, it's that idea of power and range. So there was always backwards compatibility. I had to roam, I connected to things. So that backwards compatibility typically meant your device could be either tricked into connecting to a 2G network, or if the network wasn't available, or your network said, hey, it's really congested, you need to downgrade. The devices listen. You have to understand that these devices have a nice communication pattern with outside entities on the cell towers and everything else. It's like, hello, and the cell tower goes, hello. It's like, I want to send lots of data, and you go, no, you shouldn't, or maybe you can, or yeah, I'm free. And there's a conversation that goes, whoa, stop. There's other people here. You need to wait your turn. There's a whole sets of protocols that are actually done on that from the carrier controls. And this is one of the things that they take advantage of now. If I pretend to be a cell tower in here, which takes about $500 in parts to be a cell tower. So it used to be you needed $100,000, a big truck, lots of things. Now you $500 a PC and you're good. So the portion of it is able to say, hey, how does this actually work? And the carriers have always had lots of control over the devices. If you traveled, you had software always downloaded to your device when you came into another GSM environment. But by default, if you roamed over to somebody says, hey, here's my roaming profile. I'm going to load this onto your device so you know how to operate in my network. So we've always kind of trusted these carriers, but now when I have a capability to be a carrier for you, your phone and your device explicitly trust me in a lot of cases with that. And sometimes people take advantage of that through authentication, emergency calls. You saw one last week where somebody was like, hey, I didn't buy a SIM yet. I was able to use the text or voice or data. And all three of those have different sets of controls. In some cases, voice will always work. If you take your SIM out of your phone, it says you can still make emergency calls in a lot of cases. But you shouldn't, but you can. This is part of some of the issues that are there. Sometimes text is kind of the next level up, and data is the final level that says, yeah, there's different levels that allow you to operate and everything else. You also have the cell towers themselves, how they operate. Some of those operate as a local network. So in other words, if everybody's here and everybody's devices are connected to a particular AT&T cell tower, all those devices kind of operate and can communicate in some cases back and forth on a peer-to-peer level inside that environment because of the network, the way it's actually set up. There's been a lot of cases where the SS7 switching signal generation 7 has been exploited and looked at of how the towers do handoffs, how the towers talk and communicate with that. Cell phones are actually really remarkable. We take a lot for granted that I can pick up my phone and call somebody somewhere, anywhere in the world and get an answer and drive down the road at 60 miles an hour and it goes from one tower to the next tower to the next tower to the next tower. And typically doesn't necessarily drop the call. Sometimes it does, but that's truly remarkable as you get in and try to do the traffic analysis. Hey, how does it go from here? And then all of a sudden it appears 5 miles down the road and it still maintains that and you don't hear anything. Communication is still there. So now we looked at the cellular side of it and the OS. Let's take a look at the applications that are there. And applications are tricky. Why? Because they're applications. They're not really written by the manufacturers. In some cases they are, but most of the time they're written by third parties or other people or other organizations. So you always have rogue applications that you can do. So any of the applications that I want to, I can pull out of the phone or off the marketplace and typically make modifications to. and then put them back into the marketplace or put them back into a website that's actually there. I can take things that are branded as somebody else, bring them on and brand them as myself. Hey, this is Rich's camera. It's not. I just stole it and decided to sell it, use it, leverage it as something else that's actually there. So that's always an issue with rogue applications in the environments. Over-permission is always a big issue. The number of times that I've seen an app that's like, I need things that I want to talk to your contacts, I want to store stuff to your drive, I want to do all these different things. In a lot of cases, it's like your flashlight. You just turn on and off my camera flash. You do not need my GPS location for anything. But over-permission is really, really common, both for the sinister side. So both for the side that's, hey, I want to keep track of this, or I want to do malicious things, or I want to use your phone to do malicious things, like click fraud and some of the other things that are actually there because it's mobile. People ask, well, why do you want to take over my phone, or why would you do it with my phone? It's mobile. It constantly changes IP addresses. 2, it can get to different things almost at any point in time, and there's no barriers to stop it in a lot of cases. So it's kind of the perfect thing when I want to do kind of things that I want to be malicious on, go to sites, go to open pages and things like that, all behind the scenes that you never see that your phone's actually doing. So, sometimes people do things, sometimes apps are created that, we all remember this Snapchat. Hey, we don't save your pictures. Oh, sorry, we kind of do. Not our fault, forgive us, it's there. A lot of applications on Android and some of the others use like databases to store their data, SQLite and everything else. They dump everything in there. They're like, oh, it's obfuscated, you can't figure it out. And like the keys are in the app. It takes like 30 seconds to decode, and you're like, oh, look, here's everything that's there. I have access to it. So a lot of times the application vendors do not go, excuse me, do not go with the idea that this is an insecure platform. They go with the idea that this is a secure platform. You're not going to lose your phone is locked, no one can get to the data, etc. And that's unfortunately not the way you should be really creating things. The second area for application issues is typically, where do these devices talk? So you think about it, it's like, well, where are these devices talking with, and what are they talking to? Everything else. And how do they talk? The number one thing that you typically find is these apps talk a lot. They talk in clear text. They send crap all over the place. Everything from your IMEI to distinct pieces of parts of information that you really don't want, shouldn't be disclosed for any given needs, shapes, or capabilities. But they do it. Just because, hey, that's there. Hey, if you enter this information in, it stays. If I enter a credit card in here, maybe it keeps it here, maybe it keeps it on the website. Where does it actually store the data? And we see this on different areas. The question is the leaking just an accident, or is it a privacy issue, or is it just on purpose that, hey, we can get ahead of this and do different things that are actually there? This is probably the biggest issue that's actually there, and the apps that are receiving this data are relatively, for lack of a better term, not very security tested, vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, or anything else, because it's mobile. It's kind of like, hey, this reports to Snapchat.com, which is not just something else, and these applications are not necessarily tied together. And we see this time and time again where you see, hey, this was broken into through the mobile app and not the website, because the website was checked and rechecked. The mobile app, not so much. Or the server that's supporting the mobile app, not so much either. Authentication is really important. How many times have we selected, hey, I want to authenticate through Facebook, or I want to authenticate through any of these other sources? And we do it on the web, we do it on the mobile apps, and again, parts of the things that are there, sometimes those are actually stored into the phone itself, which means that if I get access to the phone, I get access to your credentials and can leverage and use those easily as there. Marketplace issues are also super common. And marketplaces are kind of weird. We pretty much now, since we have two flavors of operating systems, we have Google Play Store, iTunes for Apple, and it's there. To be perfectly honest, people are like, malware is so awful. Most of the malware always comes from untrusted sources. There are a few exceptions where malware is downloaded from the marketplaces, but those are much rarer than that when you look at the volume of downloads and everything else that are actually occurring. It's a much lower percentage than your average PC. If you think about where you get PC from, it's like you don't even get to choose a marketplace. You go out to the internet and go onto Google and say, hey, I'm looking for Adobe Flash Player. Yeah, take any of the first 10 links. They're all malware. Those are the areas that are there. The marketplaces did have issues when they first got established. Everyone wanted it. The carriers wanted their piece of the marketplace. The providers wanted their piece of the marketplace. Everybody wanted their piece of the pie to monetize your cell phone usage. The problem was that, well, most of them are free or cost a little bit, and there's not that much generation on that side of it. So most of the marketplaces died, or they kind of coalesced into, hey, here's just our T-Mobile tool set, or our Verizon tools. Not anything else that's on those sides where we're trying to sell other things on the marketplaces that are there. And then some of the marketplaces just got really out of control. Just anybody could put anything on there, which most of the time ended up with being malware. Most of the marketplaces now have code review, kind of. They'll go in and statically and look at the stuff and say, hey, have we seen this before? Does it look like any other application? If it does, we'll flag it. If it doesn't, then it goes on. And it keeps the applications and it keeps the things in the marketplace pretty much secure. It'll bounce anything that's not developers. If you're a new developer, it's kind of a reputation based. Hey, have you uploaded stuff before? Where have you done it? How did you wanted it? There are some people that say, hey, there's a static code review done where people look at the code. That's really not the case. We see time and time again where there's definitely bad and evil code that people got really sophisticated with that's there. Now, one of the things I do want to tell you is that if I put code in there to say, go out to xyz.server.com and download an ad stream or download something, that code is still good. That server that you're going to download the information from gets bad. So a lot of the bad applications people are talking about and putting on different sites, they'll look perfectly good, but in 6 to 8 weeks, that server that you're going to now turns evil and starts sending stuff into your thing. It's like, oh, I got a pop-up now. What's this about? Where's this? Or an icon will appear magically on your device. So this is some of the areas that you get into that's there. And there are evil applications. They target things like keyboard translations, other things that are downloaded and say, hey, if I can watch what you're typing, that's perfect. Don't have to do anything else. So, hey, I can speed your typing up by 25% because we have a very sophisticated keyboard that your keys swell according to your typing characteristics. People are like, wow, cool. Yeah, unfortunately, as that's streaming, it's taking all this data and sending it to a server in Russia, which is now parsing and putting all your stuff back together. One advice, only download from trusted sources. Do not ever download any application from any sources and try to side load it, which is basically, hey, I just loaded it into. That will cause you grief at some point in time. They all do. And most of the time, everybody's now trying to push things to the marketplace. Go here, go here, go here. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Google, you can go to iTunes, and you'll find the same stuff. Pokemon Go was a perfect example of this. When they had to rush, when it was being slowly released, there were so many bad versions of it floating around that there were so many people that got their phones owned because they downloaded a bad version that's actually there. And when you get your phone owned, people are like, oh, well, how do I know? That's the whole point. Most of this stuff is really designed just to sit on top of everything and suck everything else off. Doesn't care about what you're there. It's looking for bank accounts. It's looking for things that you're going to type into it. It's looking for passwords, credentials, and other things. Its whole purpose is just to sit quietly by, listen to what you do, and send it someplace else. Not really to say, hey, I want to annoy you, or I want to control things, or do different things that are actually there. Now, if you look at the actual device, there are some specifics that go with every device. You have the radios. So there's multiple sets of radios: Bluetooth, NFC, Wi-Fi, cellular. All the radios have device issues. If there's an exploit in Wi-Fi, or there's an exploit in Bluetooth, guess what? It's going to be vulnerable. In a discussion, it's not like it's running some special software that's not vulnerable if this protocol is an exploit. So anytime you see that, regardless, and you're like, okay, maybe I should turn Bluetooth off, or other capabilities that are there. External interfaces are also key. And what I mean by that is, yeah, we use our USB as a charging, but it's also a USB. In other words, if you have malware on it, some of the more prolific malware that copies itself to shared drives and USB keys and everything else, it'll copy itself to the phone. Won't infect the phone, because it's designed to infect the PC, but when you're, oh, I need to charge my phone and plug the USB in, oh, there's your PC. And then every other person you give to. If you go to the charging station at the airport, plug it in, you potentially infect that as well. So there's all sorts of different things that are actually there, especially on external interfaces that are there. Each of the interfaces always have a debug mode, which gives you direct access onto the device. Doesn't matter the devices, all sets of devices have a debug mode that's either enabled or not enabled by default. And enabling it, you give your device a lot of control through that USB channel. I would not recommend doing that on a regular basis. It's really cool because, hey, I got all these additional things. You never use them. You're not dumping memory or accessing files directly through the USB or anything else. You usually boot it up and go, hey, here's my pictures, drag, drop onto the side. So that's some of the areas. Storage used to be a big issue because everything was unencrypted, and whether I do my SD card, non-SD card. Now, most everything, as we've seen with the last Apple fiasco, is encrypted. We are storing things in encrypted formats, which is good and bad at the same time. Why is it good? I lose my phone, don't have to worry about it. Why is it bad? Because if I pull out my SD card of that, the only device that can read that SD card is that phone. Not anything else. It doesn't go, hey, can you enter your password in? Can you do something else? No, that phone has to be the guy that does it. So you have this kind of issue when you're trying to transfer data in and out. So most of the time people transfer data via either over the air through some kind of connectivity or through the USB function that's there. Pin lock or any kind of locking mechanism, whether it's pin, pattern, facial, better than nothing. Do never leave your phone with no lock code, ever, that's there. Simply due to the fact that that means anybody that picks up your phone has complete access to it. Unless you don't put anything on your phone, which I find really hard. And people are like, I don't have anything on my phone. Good. Take it here and hit it with a hammer and you won't have any loss. And you watch people and they're like, no, you can't do that. Why? Well, my contact, well, you have stuff on here. You always will have stuff. It doesn't matter if you, I don't have my Facebook or anything else, but I have all my contacts and some of the other things that are there. There's also other boot up protections. So if you think about it from a boot up perspective, if my device prompts me for a password, what does that really mean? Well, if somehow my device ever got turned off and then it turned back on, you want it to prompt you for a PIN or a diagnostic before it comes completely up. But simply just do the fact that way nothing gets loaded onto it before it does. There's a security level that's actually there. That's something that usually has to be enabled. Because typically they go, hey, just boot up without having to recognize a PIN for that. But the idea behind it is that if my phone is ever powered down or lost or anything else, I can get the information back. One of the other areas that is there, most of the operating environments are going to a TPM type interface. Safe Zone from Qualcomm chipsets and other things, which trusted platform is basically an idea that says, hey, think of it as a safe. I can stick stuff in here, no one can get it out except for me. I know the combination, I can pull it out at any point in time and use it, but I'm only going to use it inside the safe, and then I'm going to lock the safe again. So you have that capability that's very quick and very easy. Most of the software is there. It hasn't caught up to the hardware components yet. So Qualcomm is using one kind of area of TPM. There's a lot of other areas that are kind of being focused. Eventually, they'll put a TPM chip on the thing, just like most of your laptops have TPM chips on. So if I want to do a biometric on my laptop, it's safe on that side of it. So those are some of the areas that you get into on a regular basis that's a little better. There's a popular idea that people like to say is that, hey, I can bring my own devices to work. Yeah, you can. I don't know if it gives you benefit. There's lots of people that say, oh, this is great, or no, it's not. Oh, there's so many hurdles to jump through. It's there. The idea behind it is, hey, you're accessing corporate data on a device, and I have to be able to protect it through containerization or other things to be able to adopt or take control of that device. How's the easy way to actually do that? And this is some of the stuff that gets into it. Limited support, cost driving, understanding. It's a corporate function. It's usually driven by cost and other things. Sometimes in small organizations it works well. You get enterprise level, it gets hard. Put MDM on it, you probably have more hurdles you go through on an MDM device than if I just handed you a device and said, hey, this is your corporate phone and here is your, you can use your personal phone. You don't need you to have two phones. And so there's some disruption in that. How much of that is being driven is kind of questionable. We talked wireless issues, the same thing. Bluetooth, NFC, casting, sharing, Ethernet, cellular. They're magic. They're in the air. You can't see them. You're there. But also think about them as a social engineering aspect. A bad guy sitting at a location can pick out your phone and go, hey, look, welcome to Starbucks. Please click here for your free coupon. Oh, cool. Done in some cases. Airport stores, other locations where I'm trying to get people, either through wireless hotspot, looking for promiscuous Bluetooth, other types of things that are there. I now have the social engineering aspect on an electronic aspect of that. When you're like, oh, you must want to give me a coupon because I'm standing in Starbucks, or I'm walking by Starbucks, or I'm at the airport lounge at the United Club. All those little places, you can now do different things based on your device. Just by pretending to be a Wi-Fi hotspot or anything else, bring up a page, ask you for information, and you believe it. Why? Because you're there. In a mobile device, it's not, I don't have the same capability I have on my PC about validation. Connected device issues are always there. Your phone's connected to everything. This is also the weakest link. Because a lot of times it's like, hey, I trust my phone, and when you program it for your car, it's like, hey, do you want me to remember your phone? And then the first thing the car does is like downloading all your contacts. The number of rental cars I've gotten into and going, look, I have everybody's contacts. Let's make some phone calls. Because it does. It's just that way. The connected device, you have a transfer of trust. And it's usually through some little yes or no. Yes, okay, I'm done. And it's like transfer trust. I didn't want my phone to unlock my house. Not a chance, ever, on that side of it. But it's part of the thing. It's like, yeah, I want to be able to have an app on my phone that goes open the garage door. I want an app on my phone that tells me things. There is a wonders of things that go on in a connected environment. Between the house, the home, the apartment, and there are so many cool things you can do. Just understand the security implications of when you're doing that, and always think about, are you transferring trust from one place to the next? Because if you are, you go back to the simple thing. Shouldn't there be some kind of authentication? Shouldn't there be something? And maybe there is. Maybe it's all behind the scenes, or maybe it's really not. Maybe it's a 4-digit PIN with that. And again, managing your life. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. One of the key takeaways on this is that if you look at around 2019, the number of connected devices connected together will be the amount of global internet traffic that was in 2012. So the amount of information that is being shared through these connected devices somewhere in the not so distant future will actually be the size of the internet 3 years ago. So, in conclusions on this, there are lots of different things that you can do. I really wish there was like, hey, this is the perfect solution. There's not any good, perfect solution. There's not anything that's actually going to cause. So if you think about it, and going back to the original idea, if you're playing a game that has a no-win scenario, I can choose not to play, so I can take my mobile device and take a hammer and smash it. That's not going to happen. I like my mobile device. So what are you going to be left to do? I have to do something. I have to have some levels of controls and some level of aspect to be able to mandate this. So it's easy. You cheat. I know that's a bad term, but you basically go, I know what I go into, and I'm not going to go into a scenario where I'm not going to win. So in some cases, I know my device is not secure, so I treat it that way. I question anything that comes off of this device, may or may not be potentially mine. At the same time, I have controls around this device where I know what went into it, I know what applications came onto it, I know what I'm actually connecting to, and I don't just connect to any open Wi-Fi network. I don't connect to any strange Bluetooth network. I don't leave my Bluetooth turned on when I'm not using my Bluetooth headset or my car. It's just normal best practices of doing something. The problem is we get so caught up in this that you walk away and you're no longer prepared. Or I think, hey, this is really cool. I don't want to type in my 4-digit PIN. That's so hard. You're like, really, seriously? 4 digits is really hard for you to either remember or take the time to actually type? No, it's not. Get over it. Because if you don't, I'm going to own your phone. I'm going to own your life. Because the consequences are, I have access to everything. This is kind of your wallet. So if you allow me access to your wallet and I can make an identical copy of it, I can beat you. Really quickly, really easy, faster than anything else. This is what the criminals are after, is this. Because I don't have to do research, I don't have to go in and try to guess your bank account information, it's all there. So this is the issue that you run into. The simple thing of not doing something is just giving the criminals complete access to your life. Yes, question?
So I already know how complex it is to come up with a solution that protects the phones because they're all different operating systems and all the different vendors, cell phones and so on. But you know, there is not a lot of great protections available when you buy as a third party to put on your phone. But if there are, would you share things that you've seen that you like?
Good question. There's lots of protections, and I think part of the protections are kind of the what do you do with your phone. I'm not a big believer in mobile malware. If you get your apps from reputable sources, you don't need mobile malware. But if you're downloading every other camera app because you're looking for some feature film when you have 40,000 apps on your phone, yes, you need mobile malware.
Do you have a favorite?
Depends on the operating side, on that side of it, whether it's Android or iOS. Android side, Lookout is probably one of the better ones to leverage and use on that side. And again, most of the operating systems now is like, oh, we do malware, but we also do all this other stuff. Oh, your permissions and things, that's okay. It's not anything that's there, that's on that side of it. If you're very sophisticated, you can always look at things like VirusTotal now has all the schemas for mobile apps in there as well, so you can scan for a hash, put it up in there and go, hey, has anybody seen this before? Oh, this is bad. And we've seen apps from the cellular providers that have turned bad over the periods of years as well.
How about on the Apple side? Is there anything like some of the Sophos stuff is actually pretty
good. Some of the other stuff gets into some of the other areas. The Apple stuff is really from the jailbroken stuff side of it. If you're not running jailbroken devices, you're in the same Android boat. If I'm not getting my stuff from different areas, and I think that's kind of the key area is what's your behavior around it. And the problem with mobile is very different than the rest of the environments because everybody uses their devices differently. It's very much similar to PC, but even more fragmented with different things that are there. Because you can have somebody that uses an app and they will never get rid of that app on that side of it. Which could be like, hey, this is a big issue. No, I need this app. I need this capability for some strange reason.